Purge. Interesting term. You may have a chance to purge soon.
This is not a test. This is your emergency broadcast system.
Imagine, if you will, an America deeply divided. A nation where a crazy cabal of religious right-wing elites seek to eliminate people of color through racist policies masked as crime reduction bills and economic reform. Okay, now let's talk about the Purge film series. Created by writer-director James DeMonaco and produced by Blumhouse, The Purge is a dystopian political horror franchise that presents an America from an alternate timeline, where crime and poverty have all but been eliminated because a new annual holiday has been reserved for total lawlessness. On Purge Night, which takes place on March 21st, citizens are allowed to loot, plunder, maim, and murder to their heart's desire, provided they don't go after politicians or children, or use like a nuclear bomb, we think. The message mentions Class 4 weapons or lower, so we assume a Class 5 weapon is a Motherbox or something. In Purge America, what begins as a social experiment that the rich secretly use to line their pockets and kill those they deem undesirable to society quickly becomes a dangerous and powerful movement. Violence itself becomes its own religion, where cleansing one's soul of its quote-unquote beast is seen as a righteous and godly act, and those who perish on Purge Night are seen as glorious martyrs. So, how did this batshit American horror holiday begin? Well, we'll track all that as we examine the Purge universe timeline in all its chronological and diabolical detail. With the saga's fifth movie, The Forever Purge, headed to theaters, here's what's happened in Purge America so far. 4 movies and 2 seasons of a TV show, many Purge nights have been explored. Dozens of characters have endured countless nightmares, and Purge fashion showcased the shining jewels of the psychotic runway. From Apocalypse Mime, to Mount Rushmore murder mob, to Leatherface's prom date, to Greasy Guy who wants to explain music to you, or Gropey Guy who thinks you owe him sex, or Slimy Guy who jokes he's going to use Purge Night to kidnap you. Okay, we get that those last two aren't costumes as much as dudes just being the worst, but the violent whims of gross men is also a big part of the Purge. The Purge series is meant to reflect much of the abject ugliness and racism present in our country. Some say it's a warped funhouse mirror approach to an alternate American history, while others have argued that as the series has gone on and the US become more fractured and frightening, it became more of a regular shaped mirror, and sadly less bizarro than originally anticipated. The Purge timeline begins in 2014, when a wealthy, bigoted, fear-mongering political party calling themselves the New Founding Fathers, or the NFFA, came into power, defeating Democrats and Republicans. With NFFA President Bracken in charge, the new regime went to work on eliminating the poor class, stoking the flames of economic anxiety, and classic go-to racist tropes like fear the other and protecting white families from urban crime. In 2017, with the aid of behavior scientist Dr. May Updale, aka Marissa Tomei clearly playing a lesser May, the NFFA decide to use Staten Island as a testing ground for a radical social experiment. Beginning on the evening of March 21st and lasting 12 hours, all crime, including murder, would be legal if participation levels met expectations, meaning if enough people got out there and killed the living shit out of each other, this night would be deemed a success and could then roll out the following year nationwide. Dr. Updale's bonkers research led her to believe that if people could blow off steam in the worst way possible in a confined environment during a set window of time, they'd be less likely to act on violent urges year-round. Basically, this gal's treating all of America like a serial killer that can satiate its awful urges if just provided victims in a timely manner. Right out of the gate, we see the game being rigged. Not only is the NFFA offering cash incentives to people who stay in the borough overnight, but they promise an extra bonus to those who actually go out there and body any bozos in their path. What the NFFA discovers, though, is that while yes, the experiment results in a few murder-death kills, most of which are done by a junkie psycho named Skeletor, who also inadvertently gives Purge Night its name, most people just do some light looting or some gentle vandalism, you know, as a treat. Mostly, the people take advantage of not being harassed by the cops and throw a big block party. See that scary guy in the horned mask? He's not even a purger. He's a drunken reveler, just enjoying a fine evening with friends. Once NFFA Chief of Staff Arlo Sabian sees the first purge is a failure, he immediately evokes Plan B and kills off Updale. So, what's Sabian's backup scheme? Well, he brings in outsiders, specifically marauding mercenaries and white supremacists, to lay ruin to everything and everyone. Funnily enough, this cheat kind of gives birth to purge masks, because obviously no one needs to wear a mask on Purge Night. There's absolutely no need to conceal one's identity, right? But these hired gunmen all wore masks to hide the fact that they weren't NFFA registered Staten Island residents. Once local drug kingpin Dimitri realizes that a bunch of Nazis have been brought in to literally wipe out entire blocks of low-income housing, he goes full John McClane and takes them all out with the help of his purge protesting ex-girlfriend and her brother. Despite Dimitri's best efforts though, and an impressive amount of fricasseed fascists, including Zack Snyder's Mr. Rogers, the first purge experiment is deemed a staggering success, with the American people never learning that the majority of the violence was caused by KKK clowns. Yep, the annual purge was off and running. With the first full rollout happening in 2018, the next time we check in with Purge America is in 2022. The annual night of atrocities is now an established holiday happening, and home security salesman James Sandin has made a killing off rich people barricading themselves indoors with his latest state-of-the-art model of domestic fortification. Here, we catch a glimpse of the purge from the perspective of well-to-do suburbanites, who, despite using security measures, also feel they're pretty much safe tucked away inside their McMansions. Everything goes haywire for the Sandins, however, after James's daughter's you-can't-keep-us-apart boyfriend tries to kill him. At the same time, his son opens the house to a homeless man fleeing a mob of rich psychopaths who are specifically targeting vagrants because they deem them to be unworthy pigs. Sidebar, at this point in Purge history, America is experiencing record lows of unemployment and crime, while at the same time, accusations are flying about how the Purge targets the poor who are unable to protect themselves and favors the privileged who can afford to hide in safety. The question being asked, is the purge really about money? James and his family are then confronted by the purge mob, fronted by a polite leader who demands they hand over the homeless man named Dante because it's their God-given right to release the beast. After much soul-searching and James admitting to his wife that his security system is actually flawed and mostly for show, the family decides to protect Dante from the horrendous horde and fights back. James is killed in the process of purging the purgers, and his family is then captured by their own neighbors. Yes, next-door app lunatics who've harbored resentment against the Sandins for becoming richer than they are. This opens up another layer of the purge, which is personal vendetta. Why kill randomly when people can use Purge Night to kill someone they don't like for whatever reason? Usually for reasons the victim themselves aren't even aware of. Anyhow, Dante saves the Sandins and goes on to become a very important figure in the Purge timeline. Also in 2022, during a heinous Purge Night home invasion, a young Charlie Roan and her family are captured and tortured for hours by a madman who forces them to listen to his Purge playlist. Come morning, before the sirens sound the end of the festivities, he plays them some George Clinton and tells the mom she must choose which one family member survives. It happens to be Charlie, and she too will become a big player in Purge politics. In 2023, 1 year later, there is an active anti-purge rebellion happening in Los Angeles led by a man named Carmelo Johns. Dante, the homeless survivor of the previous year's purge, is one of his lieutenants. On this night, depressed cop Leo Barnes suits up to go murder a man who killed his young son while drunk driving. On his journey, though, Leo rescues a mother and daughter who've been captured by, yes, more paid racist mercenaries that the NFFA employs to sweep through the projects and kill everyone, led by this guy, Big Daddy, who's basically like a hipster pop-up shop, but instead of it being kitschy pop culture themed drinks and snacks, it's a demonic armed version of Big Mouth Billy Bass. So, as much as he wants to purge himself, Leo is unable to ignore people in need and winds up leading a bunch of scaredy cats through downtown LA on the worst night of the year. They survive snipers, flamethrowers, and even a Running Man style hunting ground for the rich and powerful. After they're captured and auctioned off as purge victims to elite dickbags who want to unfairly stalk them while armed to the teeth. Yes, this is how the wealthy purge. They literally pay to have people brought to them where they can release the beast in the most cowardly way possible. Another scenario? Say you're dying from a disease. You can just sell yourself to millionaires so they can chop you into bits in the name of Jesus. Yeah, it sucks a million eggs, but at least your family gets taken care of. Also, it should be noted that by 2023, the full merging of Christianity and purge violence has taken hold, giving those in charge a psychological excuse for being cruel killers. In 2027, which is the 10th anniversary of the Purge, a full-blown cult has formed that attracts lost souls and runaways, convincing the poor saps into willingly becoming victims for other people and martyr themselves in the name of Purge Night, which is now the holiest of American holidays. Of course, the backers of this sinister sect are the NFFA, who've just discovered a new way to filter out undesirables from society. A Marine, Miguel, leaves his post overseas to come home to New Orleans after he learns his sister Penelope has joined this cult, and spends the night tracking her down. The two of them had lost their parents years ago during a Purge-produced home invasion, and ever since then, she's been an emotional wreck. Miguel and Penelope represent the young generation who've basically lived with Purge Night most of their lives. At one point, saving people on Purge Night was an unwritten no-no, as people's right to purge was considered a divine decree. But 10 years in, a few new humane practices had popped up, like the idea of traveling triage vans that helped the injured while all emergency services were suspended, and the idea that hospitals are off limits for purging. And there are even unofficial neutral zones established where people can check their weapons and grab a drink. But with those slight reprieves come even more sinister machinations, like the idea of purge bounty hunters, who basically take as many assassination assignments as possible during the night, or game show style live streams that lure in victims and put them through lethal obstacle courses. Or, worst of all, things like the Carnival of Flesh, which is straight up not as sexy as it sounds. In this sinister circus setting, purgers can bring victims or purchase victims and then kill them off in themed ways, like Salem Witch Trial style or Spanish Inquisition style, which are both terrible Doritos flavors. And yes, men are still completely awful, like the man you went out on one date with and then never called him back, and now, because he's a fragile entitled creep, he wants to kill you. By the year 2031, which is our best guess at the year, the Purge is in full ferocious swing. It's a wicked way of life for all Americans, but cracks in the NFFA's facade have begun to reveal themselves. The regime's corrupt and prejudiced practices start to unravel, as scientific research shows that, after more than a decade, the Purge was making people more violent. American culture itself is infecting citizens like a plague, but on a mental level. Of course, all the academics who discover this are killed off by the government because those findings directly contradict everything the NFFA's been preaching. College student Ben, who's left to die by his best friend on Purge Night, takes a life in self-defense and finds himself forever changed. He also finds the God mask used by the scary dude in the 2023 Los Angeles Purge and adds his own brand of madness to the minimalist disguise. Ben, as an example of someone psychologically altered by the Purge and having killed someone during the Purge, becomes increasingly disturbed and moody, eventually killing people during the time of year when no one's supposed to be breaking any laws. Ben then becomes addicted to killing, no matter what day of the year it is. NFFA surveillance agent Esme, who believes in the Purge and actually watches events unfold on Purge nights to make sure the specific rules of no rules are being followed correctly, finds out there's a cover-up about the research and that a bunch of non-Purge night kills were sanctioned by the NFFA. This makes her a fugitive herself. With no other recourse, she teams with a noble bank robber, Ryan, who usually works with a crew on Purge nights to pull off heists. Together, they plot to broadcast all the crooked NFFA information to the public during the following year's Purge. On that faithful night, or morning after really, she and Ryan are both killed by an NFFA death squad. Specifically, Esme is executed after the ending siren sound. The government clearly broke the rules of the Purge to kill off people it deemed to be an enemy. Needless to say, this three-pointer after the buzzer does not go over well with the public. Esme and Ryan's outing of the NFFA's blatant lies and manipulation and subsequent deaths fueled the anti-Purge movement even more, setting us up for events that happen almost a decade later. In 2040, Senator Charlie Roan, yes, who once watched her whole family die on Purge Night 18 years previous, is a rising presidential candidate who wants to abolish the Purge. Her support is growing and the NFFA is scared. Murder has become, at this point, America's religion, and in a desperate move, the white-haired bastards pulling the strings changed the rules of Purge Night so that politicians are no longer off limits. They claim it's a response to accusations of inequality, but it's actually so they can send their own armed Nazis to eliminate Charlie. Charlie's top security man is Leo Barnes, remember him? Who's also now highly invested in abolishing Purge Night since, back in 2023, he almost did something he'd have seriously regretted and become a monster himself. Leo is still the no-nonsense hard-ass he was all those years ago as a vengeful cop, but now he uses his grit and gruffness to protect the one woman he believes can make a change. At this time, Dante, who long ago survived being killed by a suburban Purge mob thanks to the Sandin family, is now the full leader of the anti-Purge rebellion. On this fateful Purge Night, on the run from a kill squad, Leo and Charlie are almost killed by a bunch of European visitors, known in the media as murder tourists, who literally travel to America to purge and doll themselves up in Americana, like if the bank robbers from Point Break wanted to disembowel you, or if your elementary school social studies coloring book came alive and tried to eat your dumb face. Saved by local deli owner Joe, along with his employee Marcos and former gang member Laney, Charlie and Leo make it to the Resistance's underground lair. Though Charlie and rebel leader Dante both hate the Purge, they disagree about how to combat the evil powers that be see, as Dante, over the years, has used Purge Night to flat out kill countless wealthy Purge supporters and now plots to kill Charlie's political opponent, Minister Owens, a religious zealot who truly believes those who commit violence are vessels for God. Charlie insists that Owens' death would make him a martyr and cause her to lose the election, but Dante sees no other way. After Charlie is captured, though, and brought out for the NFFA's Midnight Purge Mass as a special sacrifice, Leo and Dante team up to rescue her. Months later on election night, Charlie is a lock to win the presidency, and news floods in about NFFA supporters reacting violently to the voting results, which will set us up for the Forever Purge, where maniacs refuse to stop purging when the sirens signal the end of the night and just continue to kill and cause chaos in broad daylight. And that's where the Purge saga left things, with America on the brink of violence because racists are upset about voting results, something so far-fetched it could only have been dreamt up by Hollywood's wild and kooky creative machine. For all your other purging needs, be sure to subscribe to IGN wherever you like to purge. Watch.